Okay, in this video we are going to continue watching the movie that is associated with our textbook. We're starting out with chapter 9 here in French 2001. If you're not familiar with the movie for this textbook, let's say this is the first course that you've taken with this textbook, you've taken face-to-face classes at other times, or if you just like a refresher, there is a document on Blazeview where I go through what happens in the other film sequences. As a reminder, we have the same sequence or part of the film for every 2 chapters. So when I post these guided viewings, what I'm doing is I'm pulling out the grammar points that we are talking about for that week. So the guided viewing for every week would be different, but the same movie. So I'm pointing out different things in the movie. And this movie, this sequence rather, is very rich in topics for us. So this week will be a little bit short because we're only covering the conditional, but I'd also like to focus a little bit on what's happening in the movie as well, because this is the first time we've seen this sequence. Okay, so in order to get to this, media library, that's changed somewhat. It used to say video library. So I go to my ebook, I go to media library, and they make it very nice for us because we can just do by chapter. We don't have to remember which of the sequences we're doing. So here we're in séquence 5, une rencontre, and also as a reminder, you can find the video scripts always in the weeks on Blazeview. So every week that we use this séquence, you can find this video script there in the module for that week in Blazeview. If you'd like to print it out and follow along. Also, one good strategy is to go back and see if you can identify where those grammar points are. So for example, today, can you identify where the conditional is? And once we've learned the future tense, can you go back and identify the difference between the future tense and the conditional tense? Those kinds of activities are often very helpful for students. So I'm going to turn on my French closed captioning here. Now, if you remember, I'm going to pause it here to show you again to remind you that Claire is staying in this very lovely historic hotel, and she has a rendezvous avec Alexis, okay, that she has already arranged in previous sequences. And so he keeps showing up at different places, but this time they actually have a meeting, and so they're going to joke a little bit about that. The fact that he keeps showing up wherever she is before, but this time they're actually meeting.
Claire Gagné, vous attendez quelqu'un?
Oui, j'attends un étranger. Celui qui me suit.
So ici, elle parle, elle fait une blague, d'accord? Elle dit, j'attends un étranger, celui qui me suit partout au Québec. Okay, so since he's always showing up wherever she seems to be, she's teasing him a little bit about having followed her, quote unquote.
Partout au Québec.
Oui, mais cette fois-ci, ce n'est pas une coïncidence, nous avons rendez-vous. Vous êtes prête?
Oui, allons-y.
Allons voir ce que cette belle capitale nous propose.
D'accord, donc ils vont voir la capitale, ou Quebec, okay? So remember your video viewing techniques. You're going to have to watch this several times in order to get almost everything from it. It's okay if you don't understand everything right now, especially since it's showing us structures that we are going to be learning about. But we can use what we've learned in other French classes, and we can also use our cognate knowledge to kind of figure out basic meanings, okay? So here we know that allons is the form of the verb aller, okay? So let's go. And then we can see belle capitale. We know they're in Quebec, okay? So let's go, Quebec. And then he's saying nous propose, and this is one of those pronouns. So what does this beautiful city have to offer us? So, for example, this phrase right here, propose, that's sort of a nice turn of phrase. It's kind of literary, but we can sort of deduce from that, okay, the city isn't actually proposing anything. He's saying, what does the city offer us? C'est assez romantique comme rendez-vous. Donc il retourne ici.
Merci, Alexis. Je me suis bien amusée aujourd'hui.
D'accord. Donc aujourd'hui, ça c'est un mot de vocabulaire de français 1001. Donc aujourd'hui, today, and we can look here, merci, okay? That's obviously thank you. And then another word, if we don't understand this construction, because we're going to be learning about that, we can see at least here, amusé, meaning amused, or so we can guess that she's saying thank you, I had fun.
Moi aussi. Je regrette de devoir partir demain.
D'accord, donc il doit partir demain, et pour lui, c'est une regrette.
Si je n'avais pas besoin de rentrer en France, on pourrait passer plus de temps ensemble.
D'accord, so from previous videos, he has already told us that he has to leave the next day. He's from France, and he's here taking care of, quote, family affairs, and he has to go back to France tomorrow. And here we can see the use of the conditional. This is the first part in the video where we can see what we're going to study this week. On pourrait, we could. And the conditional can be used to talk about hypothetical situations like this. So we could spend more time together. And this is an example of one of the irregular verbs, the verb pouvoir, meaning to be able to or can, that we learned about in French 1002. And so you can see here what we're going to discuss in our class session. You have the stem plus these endings right here. So this is a great example of you may not understand what the stem is and what the endings are right now when you're watching the video. But once we have our class session and we go through it and you're working with it in the homework, things like that, then it will make much more sense. So when you come back to watch the video again, you see that and it makes sense. So don't feel like this is the only thing you're going to hear about the conditional. We're certainly going to have a lesson on that. And that will always be the case. There's several, like I said, there's several grammar concepts in this video. So I'm only focusing on one, but each week I'll focus on a different one that we'll cover that week in our lesson.
J'aurais bien aimé passer plus de temps avec vous.
And so again, here we see a form of the conditional, and he's using it in the past, but we can still see the verb avoir and the irregular stem plus the ending. So I would have liked to spend more time with you. And that's a great example of what the conditional usually sounds like in English. I would do this. I would do that. A lot of times we associate the conditional with would.
J'espère qu'on aura d'autres occasions de se voir. La prochaine fois que vous êtes de passage à Montréal ou au Québec, vous me le direz.
Donc, elle l'invite si il est au Québec ou à Montréal. Okay, so since he lives in France, she's just saying, okay, it was very nice, let me know. and this is the future tense. We'll talk about that soon. You will let me know about it. Those are those pronouns that we talked about in French 1002. If you come to Canada again, just let me know so we can get together.
Sans faute.
Bon, je vais rentrer alors. Merci encore pour cette belle journée. Bon retour demain.
Claire, il y a des choses que j'aimerais vous dire, mais...
Okay, so they had sort of an awkward goodbye there. And here he stops her and he says, Il y a des choses que j'aimerais vous dire. Okay, so here again is the use of the conditional. And this is a great example of a regular verb where you just have the infinitive, aimer, and then we're adding on the endings. So that's a great example of that. And he's saying that there are some things that I would like to tell you, okay, or to say to you. And so again, that sense of I would like. So the verb aimer is to like, and when we put it in the conditional mode, it's I would like. And he says, but, so again, emphasizing that hypothetical or impossible nature.
Oui?
C'est que... J'espère que vous pourrez nous pardonner.
And so here, this is a strange phrase. I hope that you will be able to forgive us. Pardonner. So that's another, again, we can sort of deduce what that means, okay? And this is the future tense, but so we'll talk about that in another lesson, but that's a strange phrase because why would she need to forgive them in the future?
Pardonner? Pardonner à qui?
Donc elle pose des
Alexis.
questions.
Que voulez-vous dire?
Excusez-moi, ce n'est rien. La fatigue, je divague.
Donc c'était une phrase très bizarre. Elle pose des questions et puis elle dit oh non non ce n'est rien, it's nothing. I'm tired, I'm going off on a tangent, je divague.
Bon, je dois m'en aller. J'ai beaucoup de choses à faire très tôt demain.
Donc il faut aller, il a des choses à faire avant de partir demain.
À une prochaine fois, j'espère.
And so now we can maybe note a little bit, he kissed her hand, he had this very nice romantic date with her. And if you've noticed over the several sessions of the movie, his hair and his clothing is somewhat old-fashioned.
Mais qu'est-ce qu'il voulait dire? Pardonner à qui?
Donc elle pose des questions toujours, elle est toujours confusée. C'est vraiment bizarre. D'accord, l'homme qui se promène là, c'était l'homme bizarre qui lui a donné les lettres. So in the first parts of the film, she got these weird envelopes from him. And she keeps trying to find him. She sees him different places, but then he sort of disappears.
Monsieur?
He was the man that gave her the envelope with the reservation to that hotel. Now, here we're going to see another thing that starts to become more and more prevalent is this number 315. And so if you remember, that was also her room number, things like that. That's a Ici, c'est un peu bizarre.
Madame, madame, madame. Ça va, madame? Vous êtes blessée?
Vous êtes blessé? Are you hurt?
Non, ça va.
Vous êtes sûre? Je vous amène à l'hôpital?
Non, ça va aller.
Mais madame, je peux pas vous laisser toute seule comme ça.
Donc, il est très généreux, il est très gentil. Il veut aider Claire. Il ne veut pas la laisser, leave her, toute seule, all alone.
Vous êtes d'ici? Vous êtes en visite?
Okay, and I like this. You can really hear his Canadian accent. Here he says, sort of, "Vous êtes en visite," whereas in with a French from France accent, we would say, "Vous êtes en visite." So you can tell the different accents that you have in different parts of the francophone world a little bit when he's talking here. So il lui demande si elle est de Québec ou elle est une touriste.
Je peux appeler quelqu'un pour vous?
Donc, il lui demande s'il peut téléphoner à quelqu'un.
Ça va. Ce n'est pas nécessaire. Je m'appelle Claire Gagné. Je suis de Montréal. Je suis à l'hôtel Frontenac. Je suis pas blessée. Je suis perdue, c'est tout.
Donc, elle n'est pas blessée, hurt. Elle est perdue, just lost.
Pourriez-vous me donner les indications pour retourner à l'hôtel Frontenac, s'il vous plaît?
So from the context, we can assume that she's asking him, and we know the verb retourner. So could you, that's also a good, pourriez-vous, it's a good use of the conditional to show a sense of politeness. So could you give me, pourriez-vous me donner? So could you give me the directions back to the hotel?
Bon. Laissez-moi vous accompagner.
Donc il est très gentil. Elle est revenue à l'hôtel.
Allô? Claire? Claire, c'est moi.
Voilà, Abia.
Salut Abia, ça va? Écoute, quelqu'un a téléphoné. Une Française.
So, excuse me. Abia is calling her from Montreal to tell her that someone has phoned for Claire at work, and it's someone from France, une Française.
Elle a dit qu'il s'agissait de quelque chose d'urgent à propos de ton oncle.
D'accord. So even if we don't know all of these words, we can sort of get, and we'll learn more about them in the coming weeks as we watch this video again. We can sort of get an idea of the meaning. Quelque chose d'urgent. So something urgent. De ton oncle. And if you remember from the beginning of the film, her oncle Michel lui a téléphoné à 3 heures du matin, so very late at night, and he was very mysterious, and he said it was the night that she got the letter, and he said, you have to go to Quebec, you have to go to this hotel that you got the letter for, even though she didn't know what it was. So something urgent about her uncle.
Mon oncle Michel? Et la personne qui a téléphoné, c'était qui? Une de ses amies?
Donc, elle ne sait pas la personne qui a téléphoné. Qui? Who? A friend?
Je n'en ai aucune idée. Mais elle a laissé ses coordonnées.
D'accord. And this is something that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, but I don't have any idea. I have no idea. But les coordonnées, what would you think that would mean? In this case, telephone number.
Attends. Ok.
33 1 09 55 58 69.
And that's a great example of something that we talked about in French 1001 of how different telephone numbers look. And this is a great time for you to go back and practice your numbers by trying to say those, and then you can rewind the video and see if you've said them correctly.
Ok.
Madame Papillon.
Ok.
Madame Butterfly.
Merci, Abia. Je te rappellerai plus tard.
D'accord.
Oui, j'aimerais passer un appel en France.
So here again we see this conditional with the verb aimer, j'aimerais, and here again it's a type of way to be polite. I would like to make a call to France. She's speaking to the concierge or the receptionist at the hotel, so she's using a very polite tone, and we can do that using the conditional.
Parfait, merci.
Allô?
Bonjour, je voudrais parler à Madame Papy.
Okay, so here's another example of the conditional, and this is a wonderful one. This is the verb vouloir, so to like, to want to, and so here you have the irregular stem and the ending, and je voudrais is a very important phrase. When you go into a restaurant, that's usually what you're going to use when you are ordering something. I would like. It's a polite way to start off a phrase like in a restaurant, or if you're on the phone with someone that you don't know very well, like this, je voudrais parler à so and so. It's a very important phrase in France because it indicates a level of politeness that you are being considerate. Je voudrais. So even if you are French and you're used to being in a cafe or something like that, you might still use that.
Oui, c'est moi. C'est de la part de qui?
And we can also see here in their telephone conversation some really useful things for carrying on a phone conversation in France. Saying je voudrais parler à, as we just talked about, is one. And then here, c'est de la part de qui? That really means who's on the other end of the phone, or this call is coming from who. And it can mean, who is this that I'm talking to, or who are you calling for? So she's really asking her, who's on the other end of the line. But you could also use it, say, in an office. C'est de la part de qui if you're calling for someone else.
Excusez-moi d'appeler à cette heure-ci, madame. Vous avez laissé un message à mon ami.
So, laisser un message, évidemment. To leave a message.
Je m'appelle Claire Gagné.
Ah oui, vous êtes la nièce de Michel.
D'accord, so elle connaît maintenant Claire comme la nièce de Michel.
Oui, c'est moi. Mon ami m'a dit que c'était urgent.
Oui, mademoiselle Gagnère, oui, c'est terrible. Une tragédie.
D'accord? Donc, c'était urgent, terrible, tragédie.
Il était encore jeune.
So, il était encore jeune. He was still young. So you can kind of sort of start to piece together what you might be hearing in the next couple of sentences. Tragédie, he was still young.
Pardon? Mais qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
And this is a great phrase. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? And we're going to talk about this formation here in a couple of weeks. But qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? What happened?
Ma pauvre petite, j'ai une mauvaise nouvelle à vous annoncer. Votre oncle est mort.
So, as you probably guessed, her oncle Michel est mort. He's dead.
Mort? Comment?
Je l'ai trouvé dans son appartement il y a 2 jours.
Okay, so here are our favorite pronouns from French 2001. I found him, je l'ai trouvé, I found him, dans son appartement il y a 2 jours, so 2 days ago.
On allait dîner ensemble, j'ai frappé et comme il n'a pas ouvert, je suis entrée.
So they were going to dine together, and this is our imperfect tense, if you remember that from French 1002. J'ai frappé, et il n'a pas ouvert. So you can guess what, if you don't remember, you can guess what ouvert would mean. It's the past participle for the verb ouvrir, and so if she knocked, and he didn't open the door, je suis entrée. So this is a great review sentence, all of this for the imperfect and the passé composé with the agreement with the verb être of French 1002.
Et c'est là que...
Ah non.
J'ai finalement trouvé votre numéro de téléphone aujourd'hui. C'est si triste de mourir comme ça, enfin tout seul, sans personne.
D'accord, donc il est mort tout seul, all alone, sans personne, without anyone.
Le médecin a dit qu'il était mort à 9 heures du matin.
So this is important. Le médecin, the doctor, a dit qu'il était mort à 9 heures du matin. So if you think about what happened in the video, he called her around 3 a.m. in the morning, and it was about 2 days ago. And so you have to kind of think about the timing of that, and she'll explain a little bit here in just a minute.
Vous avez dit 9 heures? Ça fait 3 heures du matin au Québec.
So here she's saying that Claire's realizing that, okay, that was right when he called me. So since he was in France, the difference in time means that that was the 3 o'clock hour in the morning when he called her.
Mais il m'a appelé à cette heure. C'est pas possible.
Mais non.
So she's saying he called me then. It's not possible.
Non, c'est pas possible. C'est affreux. Je crois que vous êtes sa seule famille avec votre maman, n'est-ce pas?
D'accord. So we've seen this word over and over, seul, only, okay? And we're going to talk about this verb croire, to believe. Okay, so I believe that you are his only family with votre maman, mama, mère, okay?
Je me rappelle quand Michel me parlait de vous.
Je me rappelle, again, we'll talk about these types of verbs, but she's saying, I recall when he talked to me, so there's your imperfect and your pronoun from French 1002, when he talked to me about you. And since we're using the imperfect here, that means that it was a habitual activity in this case, in this context, that's what it's telling us. So Michel was obviously very fond of Claire.
Vous viendrez à Paris pour l'enterrement?
So then we have now, you can kind of guess maybe what l'enterrement means. If someone dies, then you have the funeral and the burial.
Oui, bien sûr, j'y vais. Je partirai dès demain si je peux.
Okay, so she's saying, I'll leave tomorrow if I can.
Bon, vous avez mon numéro en cas de besoin.
Oui, d'accord.
Mort. Michel est mort. J'arrive pas à y croire.
So here she's just saying, I still can't believe it.
Merci, Madame Papillon, de m'avoir prévenue.
Ah, ma pauvre petite, on se parlera quand vous arriverez. Je suis désolée. J'arrive pas à y croire. 62 ans, il était encore jeune. Il avait pourtant l'air d'être en bonne santé, je vous jure.
So she's sort of just repeating again, I guess, in her grief, the things that she's already said. He was 62, he was young, and here, en bonne santé. And later on in our course, we're going to be talking about vocabulary for health and things like that. So that means he was in good health, d'être en bonne santé. Il avait pourtant l'air d'être en bonne santé. So he had the air of being, or the semblance of being in good health. Je vous jure, like I promise you.
Il n'avait jamais fumé de cigarette. La pipe, de temps en temps, mais...
Merci, Madame Papillon. Je vous rappellerai.
So she says, and we'll talk about that future tense again in a couple of weeks, but she says, okay, thank you, I'll call you back. So she's contemplating here how bizarre it is, this whole situation. D'accord. So we kind of have an overview, and that viewing of the video took a little bit longer because I wanted to make sure that you remember the things from the other videos, from the other courses. So when we view them next time, that won't take quite so long, although it was short as far as the number of times that we saw the conditional. So again, it might be great if you go back and see if you can identify them once you've attended the Wimba lecture or watched the archive of it with me and we've studied it together.